On August 6, 1969, a photograph was taken. It shows a woman in her backyard. She is smiling, radiant under the warm California sun. Her name is Sharon Tate. She is an actress on the rise in Hollywood, known for her beauty and her kind spirit. In the photograph, she holds a small dog and looks relaxed, her blonde hair falling gently over her shoulders. The image captures a moment of peace, a quiet day at home. This simple, happy scene would soon become a haunting symbol of a life cut short, a final glimpse of serenity before an unimaginable storm. Sharon Tate was a star. She appeared in films like Valley of the Dolls and The Fearless Vampire Killers. Her career was gaining momentum, and she was celebrated for her talent and grace. At just 26 years old, she had a bright future ahead of her. She was married to the famous film director Roman Polanski. Together, they were expecting their first child. Sharon was more than 8 months pregnant, filled with excitement about becoming a mother. The photograph from August 6th shows this joy, this anticipation for a new chapter in her life. The timeline of this story is tragically short. It moves from a day of quiet domesticity to a night of unthinkable horror. On Wednesday, August 6, 1969, Sharon Tate was photographed in her garden, awaiting the birth of her child. Her husband, Roman Polanski, was in Europe for work, but she was not alone. She had friends staying with her, keeping her company in the final weeks of her pregnancy. The days were normal. The evenings were filled with conversation and dinner parties. Everything seemed ordinary for a summer in Hollywood. The city was alive with the energy of the late 1960s. On Friday, August 8th, the day before the murders, Sharon had lunch with friends at her home. Later that evening, she went out for dinner with Jay Sebring, Wojciech Frykowski, Abigail Folger. They ate at a popular Mexican restaurant called El Coyote. They returned to the Cielo Drive house around 10:30 p.m. It was a typical evening spent with close companions. There was no sense of impending danger. The house was situated in a secluded, wealthy neighborhood, a place where residents felt secure. The night was calm and quiet, just like any other summer night in the Benedict Canyon Hills. The clock ticked past midnight, turning Friday, August 8th into Saturday, August 9th. The location of the crime is as famous as the crime itself. The house at 10050 Cielo Drive was nestled in the hills of Benedict Canyon, a wealthy and remote part of Los Angeles. It was a sprawling ranch-style home that offered privacy and beautiful views of the city below. For Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski, it was supposed to be a safe haven, a place to build their life together and welcome their new baby. The home's seclusion, which once offered peace, became a terrifying element of the crime. It meant that no one could hear the victim's cries for help on that terrible night. According to police records and court testimony, the attack began shortly after midnight on August 9, 1969. 4 members of the Manson family, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, who acted as a lookout, arrived at the property. They first encountered a young man named Stephen Parent, who was driving away from the guest house. He was shot and killed inside his car. The perpetrators then proceeded to the main house. Inside, the attackers rounded up everyone present: Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, Wojciech Frykowski, Abigail Folger. What followed was an act of extreme and senseless violence. The official Los Angeles Police Department report detailed a scene of chaos and struggle. The victims were bound and subjected to a terrifying ordeal. The motive, as it would later be revealed, was not robbery or personal revenge. It was part of a twisted plan orchestrated by their leader, Charles Manson, to incite a chaotic race war he called Helter Skelter. The crime scene itself was deeply disturbing to even the most seasoned investigators. The word pig was written in blood on the front door, a chilling message left by the killers. It is crucial to remember the people who lost their lives on that night. They were not just names in a headline: families, careers, futures. Sharon Tate, at 26, was an accomplished actress, beloved wife, daughter, sister. She was just weeks away from giving birth to her first child, a son to be named Paul Richard Polanski. Her life was full of promise. In a later statement, her mother, Doris Tate, spoke of her daughter's kindness. Sharon was a gentle, loving soul. All she ever wanted was a husband and a baby. Jay Sebring, 35, was a celebrity hairstylist and a pioneer in men's hair care. He had created a successful brand and styled many Hollywood stars: Frank Sinatra, Steve McQueen. He was a close friend and former partner of Sharon Tate, a loyal presence in her life, known for his charm, talent, entrepreneurial spirit. His death was a loss to fashion and film. He was at the house that night to keep his friend company. Wojciech Frykowski, 32, was a Polish writer and aspiring screenwriter, a close friend of Roman Polanski from Poland. He had moved to the US hoping to break into film, known for his intelligence and a strong personality. He was staying at the Cielo Drive house as a guest, helping to look after Sharon. He fought back fiercely, trying to escape before he was killed on the front lawn. Abigail Folger, 25, was the heiress to the Folger coffee fortune. More than an heiress, a Harvard graduate, a dedicated social worker. She worked in underprivileged LA communities. She was in a relationship with Wojciech Frykowski and a friend to Sharon. Remembered as brilliant, compassionate, generous, with a deep passion for social justice. The loss of these four vibrant individuals, along with Sharon's unborn child and Stephen Parent, was a profound and senseless tragedy. The people who committed these crimes were not professional criminals. They were a group of young men and women who called themselves the Family. Their leader was a man named Charles Manson. He was a charismatic ex-convict who had spent much of his life in institutions. He gathered a following of mostly young people, many of whom were runaways or felt lost in society. They lived a communal, nomadic lifestyle on the outskirts of Los Angeles. First at Spahn Ranch and later at Barker Ranch in Death Valley. They saw Manson not just as a leader, but as a messianic, almost godlike figure. A cult is a group whose beliefs and practices are considered extreme or strange by the larger society. The leader often has complete control over the members. Charles Manson manipulated his followers through a combination of methods. He used drugs like LSD to break down their sense of self. He isolated them from their families and the outside world, making them completely dependent on him and the group. He also used fear, intimidation, and a twisted form of love to ensure their loyalty. They believed everything he told them, you know. The members of the family were taught to reject mainstream society and its values. Manson preached a strange mix of philosophies, borrowing from the Bible, Scientology, and even the Beatles' music. He convinced his followers that a violent, apocalyptic race war was coming, which he named Helter Skelter after the Beatles' song. He told them that they would be the only ones to survive this war and would emerge from hiding to rule the world. This bizarre and dangerous ideology became the driving force behind their actions. The group's devotion to Manson was absolute. They would do anything he asked, without question. During the trial, one of the killers, Susan Atkins, chillingly stated, "You have to have a total love in your heart to do something like that for another person." This quote reveals the depth of their brainwashing. They did not see their actions as murder. They saw them as a necessary step in fulfilling Manson's prophecy. The Manson family became a terrifying example of how charismatic leaders can exploit vulnerable people and lead them to commit acts of extreme violence. Charles Manson was the architect of the terror. He did not physically participate in the Tate murders, but according to court findings, he ordered his followers to carry them out. His goal was to create chaos. He believed that by committing shocking, brutal murders in wealthy white neighborhoods, he could start his helter-skelter race war. He instructed his followers to leave behind confusing clues, like writing pig in blood, to make it seem as though the Black Panthers or other revolutionary groups were responsible. His plan was to ignite social panic and violence. Manson's control over his followers was a masterclass in psychological manipulation. He targeted individuals seeking belonging and purpose, offering them a community and an identity when they felt they had none. He would alternate between showering them with affection and subjecting them to verbal and physical abuse. This created a powerful trauma bond, where the followers became emotionally dependent on their abuser. He controlled their access to food, sleep, and information, breaking down their ability to think for themselves. He was the center of their universe. The investigation into the murders was initially confusing. The crime scene at Cielo Drive was so brutal and seemingly random that investigators struggled to find a motive. For months, the case remained unsolved, and fear gripped the city of Los Angeles. It was only after Susan Atkins was arrested on an unrelated charge that the truth began to emerge. While in jail, she boasted about her involvement to another inmate, who reported it to the authorities. This breakthrough finally connected the crimes to Manson and his followers. During his trial, Manson's bizarre behavior captured the nation's attention. He carved an X into his forehead, which his followers later copied. He would stare at the judge and jury, make strange gestures, and frequently interrupt the proceedings. He never showed any remorse for the crimes. In a famous quote from the trial, he declared, "I have done my best to get along in your world, and now you want to kill me." His words and actions painted a picture of a man detached from reality and morality, a manipulator who saw other human beings as mere pawns in his delusional game. The murders at Cielo Drive immediately became a massive media event. Newspapers across the country reported the gruesome discovery. Television broadcasts around the world covered it non-stop. The initial stories were filled with speculation and fear. Because the victims were famous, the crime received intense attention. Hollywood, fantasy and glamour, was suddenly confronted with brutal reality. The press dubbed the killings the Tate murders. The public was captivated by the mystery and horror. Everyone wanted to know who could commit such a heinous act. As investigators linked the crimes to Charles Manson and his family, the story grew even more sensational. The image of a wild-eyed cult leader and his youthful followers shocked the nation. The media framed them as a dark reflection of the counterculture. Many young people embraced peace and love in the 60s, but the Manson family represented a terrifying new rebellion. Violence, nihilism, blind obedience. This narrative dominated the news for months. The trial became a national spectacle. The public reaction, fear, fascination, and outrage. Los Angeles residents were terrified. Sales of guns and security systems skyrocketed. The 1970 trial was followed daily by millions. In court, the defendant's behavior, singing, laughing, showing no remorse, was staggering. Prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi called the motive disturbingly bizarre. The case exposed a dark side of the 60s. Manson, Tate, Helter Skelter became synonymous with one of the most infamous crimes in American history. The Tate murders are often cited as a symbolic end to the 1960s. The decade began with the optimism of the Kennedy years and evolved into the Summer of Love in 1967. There was a widespread belief in peace, love, and the power of youth to change the world. This sense of innocence and idealism was shattered on August 9, 1969. The random, senseless violence replaced hope with fear and paranoia. The Manson family twisted ideals into something monstrous, fueling a cultural rift and a conservative backlash against youth movements. The crime also changed Hollywood. Stars no longer felt safe. They installed high-tech security systems, hired bodyguards, and retreated behind high walls. An open community of artists felt lost. Beyond Hollywood, the case sparked a national conversation about evil, the power of manipulation, and the dangers of extremist groups. The Tate murders left a permanent scar on the American psyche. Decades after August 1969, the Tate murders continue to fascinate and horrify. Charles Manson and his followers were convicted and sentenced to life in prison. But the story did not end there. Books, documentaries, films, each trying to understand the why behind the violence. The names remain widely recognized, reflecting how deeply this crime affected the nation's sense of self and its understanding of good and evil. For the families, it is unending grief. Sharon Tate's sister, Deborah Tate, has dedicated her life to ensuring the killers remain in prison, attending every parole hearing. Her advocacy keeps the human cost in view. The story stands as a warning about charismatic manipulators, extremist ideologies, and how vulnerable people can be pulled into groupthink. Ultimately, how do we honor the victims with dignity, protect society without losing freedom, and ensure the lessons of this dark chapter are not forgotten? The search for answers continues, a testament to a crime that shattered more than a home, but a nation's innocence.